Anna has our reading for today because we've been going through the parables, and so she'll be reading our parable.
Thank you. I'm going to be reading from Luke 14, verses 15 through 24. This is the parable of the great banquet. When one of those at the table with him heard this, he said to Jesus, "Blessed is the one who will eat at the feast in the kingdom of God." And Jesus replied, "A certain man was preparing a great banquet and invited many guests. At the time of the banquet, he sent his servant to tell those who had been invited, 'Come, for everything is now ready.' But they all alike began to make excuses. The first said, 'I've just bought a field and I must go and see it. Please excuse me.' Another said, 'I just bought 5 yoke of oxen and I'm on my way to try them out. Please excuse me.' And still another said, 'I just got married, so I can't come.' The servant came back and reported this to his master. Then the owner of the house became angry and ordered his servant, 'Go out quickly into the streets and alleys of the town and bring in the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame.' 'Sir,' the servant said, 'what you have ordered has been done, but there is still room.' Then the master told his servant, 'Go out to the roads and country lanes and compel them to come in, so that my house will be full. I tell you, not one of those who are invited will get a taste of my banquet.'"
Thank you, Anna. We're in the parables, and if you recall, over the last 2 weeks, we've been in Matthew. We're making a shift into Luke. And for those who haven't been with us from the get-go, I'll give a 10-cent tour of where we've been. The parables are vignettes. They're little artistic narrative expressions that are metaphor, and that they're used to both provoke and discomfort, to reveal and conceal, all at the same time. The main theme of the last couple of weeks may have been that if you sit back comfortable hearing the parables and both think that you have it and that you understand it, and or that you're the good guy in the story, you might need to read it again. You might want to revisit the parable. There's a way that parables, in their context, are provoking all of us to a kind of discomfort and a kind of hope. And that's the theme that we will stay within, is that parables here, they mess with you. I said it last week when we were talking through the parable. Get to the end of it and go, gosh, these mess with you. And they leave you a little disconcerted. And they don't provide answers, but they do bring us into asking better questions. So, I want to start with a couple of narratives. One would be a story, or picture yourself in a room, and it's the Oscars, the Academy Awards. Has anybody been to the Academy Awards? I know Steph has. She's a seat filler. Several times, right, Steph? Several times. The church of the Academy Awards or the Met Gala reveal a few things more poignantly than it does the gladiator match for being seen. And the way it is that the A-list nominees that sit up front get prominence, and if they go up for the bathroom, somebody like Steph must step in and sit in that seat, lest there be an open seat that's optically displeasing. And we must make sure that it looks right the entire time. And behind the A-listers are directors, producers, hopefuls, and if somebody is trying to really make their way forward, that means they need to be more relevant. And so it's because there's liability if it looks wrong, if the optics are wrong. And it's for sure an event of being seen. It's about being seen. Now, I'm not throwing shade on the Academy Awards or on parties or on even these kinds of award ceremonies. It's just to draw us into the reality that this is a human reality, the idea of where and how we place ourselves and the desire that we often have, which is being seen more than being known. We're far more likely to pursue being seen than we are to being known. Funny story, a guy named Paul Horner, he managed to sneak into the Golden Globes in 2014 This is, I understand, a pretty high security, high stakes event that isn't easy to, but he faked a badge, wore a tux, he grabbed a clipboard. I guess a clipboard gives you some level of authority. It shows you how easy it is to be duped. A guy with clipboard and a tuxedo walked right into the Golden Globes. He started interviewing. He printed a fake badge that just said CNN, and that's all it took. And it worked. He gave interviews. He started taking selfies with celebrities. He faked being a producer to prominent interview and red carpet folks on things that was being produced and that he was doing. It was a sham, and it worked. He only got caught because he started posting all of his celebrity selfies on Facebook. And then somehow, I don't know how the game of telephone was like, who is this guy? And he just said, his words, I just acted like I belonged there. I smiled a lot. I looked mildly annoyed. Does that tell you what works, right? I smiled a lot, looked mildly annoyed, and stayed near the people who looked really important. Security eventually did catch on. Now shift scenes out of the Academy Awards or Golden Globes, and we're at the White House Correspondents' Dinner in D.C. This is the gala where the political elite rub shoulders with those that are journalists and celebrities and donors and important folk. And it's what one reporter calls that event the Nerd Prom meets Game of Thrones. His words, because, he says, where you sit says everything. It says everything about you in that, where you sit. Close to the president, your stock is rising. Next to the dessert tray out in the back, you need to fire your publicist. Somebody messed up. And probably start updating your resume. You are not important. People smile, shake hands, exchange compliments, but make no mistake, it is a status event and a status economy, and everybody knows it. Everybody knows it. When I went to D.C. with John Eshelman for the prayer breakfast, it's a fascinating little microcosm of this. Because in the room and in the parties that ensue in the various other rooms, it's the consistent introductions. Who are you? What do you do? Right? That's usually the next thing. And then the accounting starts happening. Are you important? Do you offer me any advantage? Are you somebody I should know, or does it really matter that I know you at all? Credit to John. He throws a wrench in the gears every time, and I'm out with him, and he's meeting important people, sometimes even someone in politics, congressmen, and they say, what do you do? And John says, I'm unemployed. Now, he's not. But he tests the waters a little bit to see how quickly they'll be like, thank you very much. I'm moving on, right? I have a friend whose husband is in politics and got called when the initial first Trump administration into D.C. to be part of the administration because he'd been in politics and moved from California out to Washington, D.C. And his wife hated it in D.C. because she's a mother and a homeschooler, and she would go out there, and in the economy of the Beltway, in Annapolis and in Maryland and D.C. and Virginia, they, walking around town or at a Starbucks, she introducing herself to somebody else, probably in a pantsuit. She's saying, what do you do? And she says, well, I'm a mother, and I homeschool my children. And the reaction that she gets of a kind of an immediate like, okay, moving on. She hated it out there because she got the message loud and clear. You are of no value to me. So we transition to the text. Now imagine Jesus walks into that room, kind of room that we're talking about. He sees the elbowing, the selfieing, the curated guest list, the jockeying for position, and he clears his throat and he says, let me tell you a story. Suddenly, the whole room kind of tilts a little bit. And in the world where being seen is way more important than being known, it's better to fake your way into a room than admit you were never invited. Jesus flips all of that. He's not looking for the credentialed or the clever. He's not impressed by confidence or clipboards. He's not asking you to pretend. He wants you to come hungry, honest, and ready for a real party. Because as Jesus is inviting us in the kingdom, the guest list gets rewritten. And the ones you thought belonged at the center may not even be in the building. So first, a recap on the brilliance of parables. Some of this will be a recap for some. First observation on parables that's important is that Jesus is an indirect communicator. He doesn't speak in straight lines. Why? Because it's ineffective. There's this really hefty book that's been a great resource for me. It's nearly 900 pages by Kyle Snodgrass just on the parables, believe it or not. Yeah. And he's quoted saying here, direct communication is important for conveying information, but learning is more than information intake, especially if the learner already thinks they understand. See, Jesus used parables, these indirect means of communication, art in a way. I keep revisiting back the painting we looked at from Kirsten the first week to say that the painting is not a direct form of communication. It's indirect. Art is not direct. It's not an instruction manual. It's not an essay. It's indirect communication, but communication nonetheless. It is telling you something, and it is invoking something. As you sit in front of the painting, you are drawn into and are meant to feel and invoke. You're meant to place yourself in the narrative of the painting or to determine, where do I fit in the context of this painting in my life? You're drawn into it. I was at a table discussion during the concert we had on Sunday night, which was amazing. If you missed it, we're going to do another one in July. It was so fun. But the table conversation was one where we were talking about art and truth, and the guy at the table was talking about how all great stories tend to lead towards a specific truth, and the things that are true tend to always be true, and they get represented in story. And I say, yes, because literal truth, literalism, is the shallowest form of truth. I was thinking of standing in front of Caravaggio's Calling of Matthew. I told that story just a few weeks back, and you're drawn into this painting where you see this juxtaposition of Matthew in his modern, very unbiblical time frame in a bar, which isn't true. And you're meant to feel there's an evoking that happens. I'm moved as I stand in front of this painting. And if somebody said, yeah, but is it true? You'd say, well, yes. Did it actually happen? No. No, Matthew wasn't called to be a disciple during the Renaissance. There is a difference between literalism of having it happen and is it true? So the question of this parables that Jesus gives, is it literally true? No. Is it true, however, in the way that the painting can be? Yes. Joseph Campbell would say that metaphor is always true, sometimes actually happened, is good metaphor. And so Jesus is drawing upon these tools. He's using parables as indirect communication like art because he wasn't trying to win arguments at the table. He was provoking transformation. They're not explanations, they're provocations, and he was doing a good bit of provocations. Snodgrass says that these parables are a way that Jesus is coming in through the back window. It bypasses our intellectual defenses. It sneaks into our imagination. And he does this because I think he knows what we ultimately intuit. We know these truths I'm about to tell you because we've experienced them. One of them is called the backfire effect. Anybody ever heard of that? It's been coined and been studied a lot, especially as of late, as a result of what they call this backfire effect, the psychological phenomenon that says corrective information not only fails to change a person's belief, it actually reinforces the person's currently held beliefs. People double down on their beliefs when faced with corrective information. I wish that were just mine or their opinion, but it's well documented. Especially if the challenges that you're presenting to somebody challenges an identity, and especially if that identity is connected to morality, politics, or religion. Sending somebody contrary information that challenges their identity, and a closely held one at that, causes the backfire effect, doubling down on their currently held beliefs. There's a lot of neurological backing to this. The regions of the brain associated with pain and threat and stress, like the amygdala, they light up when the contrary information is presented. In contrast, belief reinforcement, if I say your beliefs are right, if I reinforce what you already believe, this reward circuit pops up in your brain and you feel good. We're neurologically wired to defend beliefs as part of our identity, which is why storytelling works as this cognitive bypass. This is what they've learned. Narratives, stories, or Parables, they invite empathy. The brain stimulates certain areas as if we're living in the narrative. And all of a sudden, instead of stress, what gets released is oxytocin, emotional connection. And the default mode network, these are terms that are way outside of my pay grade. I don't even know what this is. But there's a part of the brain that's involved in daydreaming and perspective taking. It becomes active, and it's associated with openness and worldview and malleability. All of those aspects of your brain light up when you're brought into a narrative. Paul Zak, the moral molecule author and a neuroscientist, says narratives engage our emotions and imagination before our reason kicks in. There's further evidence to belabor the point. They call this narrative transformation. Read a short little book by Melanie Green and Tim Brock that introduced this idea that says the critical faculties, your critic inside, it's lowered and you become more open to perspective as long as what's being discussed is narrative, story. Isn't that strange? People are less, and I'm quoting Green and Brock here from the narrative impact, people are far less likely to counter-argue when they are transported into a narrative world. Stories and narrative is not just a bit more effective in transforming one's perspective, it may be the only effective method of transforming perspective. And certainly well documented as the most effective means of transformation. And this is an indictment on our comment section culture, on what it's like to yell into the void of the internet of a contra perspective, or your own sense of usefulness as you bark at a stranger online with another perspective, or feeling as if you're doing something good by simply redirecting someone's opinion towards information that is contrary to their existing beliefs. If this tells us anything, it's saying this is an exercise in near futility. It doesn't work. And Jesus knows this. The parables, they sidestep the ego. It delivers truth sideways. It allows you and I, the hearer, to draw our own conclusions, often after it's too late to resist it. These are the parables. So back to Luke 14. Let's go back to the dinner party. And some context on this dinner party. This is the traveling section of Luke. This is where he's going from a long trip from Galilee to Jerusalem. And he is invited to dinner at Shabbat, at a Pharisee's house. Sunday supper. For them, it'd be Saturday, but for us, the equivalent of Sunday supper, right? And he's invited in. And this is probably a leader, somebody known, probably somebody important. He's invited to the house. And I have a sneaking suspicion, just me thinking, that we don't see this a lot. Jesus is not actually invited a lot into someone's important person's meal. I think because he started to get the reputation of being particularly undignified around uppity folk. I think his reputation started to precede him. If it didn't before this, it definitely will after this meal. He has a tendency to do things on the Sabbath that makes people angry. And so this is the Shabbat meal. And Jesus is watching people closely. And so what's happened in this chapter before we've gotten here, if you notice when Anna said, and then after he heard them saying this, there's this whole thing that's happened, is this wild progression. Jesus comes into the party, presumably, and it's an important one. And people are jockeying for position. He notices the jockeying for position. There is a definite honor-shame culture and prominence to the host seating arrangement that does matter, and it definitely mattered to people at that party. And imagine a party large enough with a 14-foot large table at the entrance and lots of people sitting around it. And this progression is strange because now we're mid-dinner sitting down, and we give them real names. Gary, sitting next to Jesus, has got his back hurt. He's hurting. And he maybe nudges Jesus as he's leaning for the lamb. And he feels that back tinge. And, hey, what's going on? Gary tells Jesus, my back's killing me. Jesus goes, okay, Can I have everybody's attention? I'm just going to pause for a sec. Dinner here. I know we're through the first course and all that, but I'm going to put old Gary up here on the table for a second. And some of you, if you're at that dinner party, you're like, I would die. Jesus hoists old Gary up onto the table, and his shoelaces flop into the roast, and he's table, feet up on the table, and he's saying, I'm gonna heal Gary. I'm gonna actually heal him. He's hurting, and I'm gonna take care of him. And the room is silent. And we think, reading this narrative, that everybody is like, has this huge issue with the spiritual significance of Jesus healing on the Sabbath and doing work. This is a party where I can imagine their first instinct is like, I'm dead. Who does this at a party? Oh my gosh. When could the meal have been? Maybe 3, 4 o'clock latest. Sundown is in a couple hours. You can't wait an hour, Jesus. We're in the middle of dinner. Have some couth. Like, Gary's going to be fine. Old Gary's up on the table and Jesus heals him. And I think you could hear a pin drop because nothing is said. You read the narrative of the text, everybody just goes like, well, I'm not going to say anything. Let's just try to have a normal dinner, please. Who invited this Jesus guy? And then nobody says anything, so Jesus just decides to launch into a story about the seating arrangement, which is the parable before this. Yeah, you know this whole thing about the seating arrangement? Hey, next time you're at a wedding or you're going to do a banquet or something like that, I think you should actually sit in the last seat. Because if you go up to the first seat, the host is maybe likable to come to you and be like, hey, Gary, I actually have somebody more important than you. I'm going to need you to move down the line. And you get dishonored. And Jesus is redirecting them to the upside-down kingdom to be like, actually, let's go sit in the last seat. For those really digging into the beauty of all of this, that last word that he used there is the same word we get for our eschatology, the last, and it's connected to death. There is a symbolic connection to humility and death throughout these parables. He's asking you to come to the party and die. Come to the party and die. Again, you're at this dinner party. Gary's rolled off the table. He feels great. He's like, oh my gosh. I feel amazing. And then Jesus launches into a seating arrangement story. And now they're definitely like, who invited this guy? And he's not done yet. The man reclines at the table because it was probably low. And this is where we find the beginning of this parable. Man reclines and says, blessed is he who will eat at the feast in the kingdom of God. So for sure, foot directly in mouth. Whoever was brave enough to break the silence, the guy just goes like, hey, cheers to how great it is in the kingdom. And then Jesus goes, oh, you're not getting it. Okay, let me do a third act in this meal. And that's our parable this morning. And I think it's hilarious because he's such a weirdo. If you were at this dinner, you'd be like, he's such a weirdo. This guy is so weird. Nobody even said anything. Nobody challenged the healing. Nobody was really talking about the seating arrangement, but he launches into the seating arrangement thing, and now he gives them this parable about the not-so-great banquet. And this is our parable. Man throws a great banquet. The invitations go out. One by one, the guests are busy. I bought some land. I bought an oxen. I just got married. Can't make it. I'm sorry. And these are the people that got the invitations. And so the host, he's angry and dishonored. He tells them, go out and bring in the poor, the crippled, the blind, the lame. And they come, but there's still room. It didn't fill all the seats. So he says, now go anyone, everyone. Go out to the highways and byways. Leave town and invite everybody. And then the final gut punch at the end. None of those who were invited will taste my banquet. Put yourself back at the party. This is what's just happened. And now you're sitting there. It's mid-meal. You haven't even finished the roast. Probably don't want it. Gary's feet's been all on the table. Jesus just launched into this parable. And you're like, oh, now what? I don't know. It was probably the one that you went home and told your friends, like, that was the most awkward Sunday dinner I've ever been to. I could have died. And Jesus was like, I know. That's the point. Jesus is not employing a new technique. Enter Nathan, David, and the art of indirect communication, where he's in a long line of indirect communication. In Samuel, 2 Samuel 12, the prophet Nathan confronts King David. Now remember, David has done something egregious. He's taken Bathsheba. He's potentially murdered or been a direct hand in the murder of Bathsheba's husband. And Nathan has something to say about this whole process. And so we pick up in 2 Samuel 12. The Lord sent Nathan to David. And when Nathan arrived, he said, a story, a parable. Because if Nathan comes in guns blazing to David about how terrible what he just did, what all of a sudden is triggered, what we know in David. The backfire effect, the neurological doubling down, that might have even got Nathan killed. But he says to him a story. There were two men in the same city, one rich, one poor. The rich man had a lot of sheep and cattle, but the poor man had nothing. Just one small lamb that he had bought. He raised that lamb, he grew up with him and his children. It would eat from his food at the table and drink from his cup, even sleep in his arms. It was like a daughter to him. Little hidden pun in there. The Hebrew word for daughter is bat, which is the beginning of Bathsheba's name. Nathan's doing a little jab there. This little lamb, bat. It's like a daughter. Now a traveler came back to the rich man. He wasn't willing to take anything from his flock. So the rich man didn't want to use any of his own lambs. And he didn't want to do anything to prepare for the guest who had arrived. So instead, he took the poor man's lamb and prepared it for the visitor. And David got very angry at the man. He said to Nathan, as surely as the Lord lives, the one who did this is demonic. He must restore the lamb 7 times over because he did this and because he had no compassion. And the famous words of Nathan to David in that moment is, David, you are that man. That's the power of a parable. Disarms us. It allows us to walk into the truth before we realize we're the subject of it. And Jesus does the same here. He's not just explaining truth. He's inviting you and I to inhabit it and place ourselves in that position and ask the hard question, who am I in this dinner party? Is anyone else getting slightly uncomfortable with the prospect that in this parable of Jesus from Luke, that we're the invited guests? I am. I'd be with you. In this honor-shame culture, when you throw a big feast and you invite guests of honor, the status game of parties in the ancient world, it's not so ancient. It's still that way today. Whether it be at a gala at the Met or the Oscars or Golden Globes or the DC Correspondents' Dinner or in your own home, right? Word got out that you got invited to my party. Ryan threw a party. I didn't get an invite. It all leads us to this twist in the parable. And the main point. The twist in the parable is it's time to fire the bookkeepers. Not what you were expecting, right? Each parable confronts us with the uncomfortable reality. Your assumptions about the kingdom are wrong. And there is a twist buried in this parable. It's this theme poking its nose out in the interpretive text. And watch what Jesus is doing here. Jesus has already been critical throughout all of these parables of the following items of closely held near and dear beliefs of favorite things, like the old, these are a few of my favorite things. These things are their favorite things. Being first, being found, being big, being important, being alive. Now Jesus tears down the one and only item that holds all of these futilities together. Namely, the one that has power over us, being a bookkeeper. We are addicted to keeping records and remembering scores. What we call our life is, for the most part, simply juggling of accounts in our heads. And yet, God has announced, if he's done anything here in these parables, that he, for one, has fired the bookkeeping department permanently. He's let him go. It's the bookkeeping, our enslavement to it, and God's rejection of it here. That seems to me the burden and what these closing lines of Luke 4 is drawing us into in Luke 14. Jesus is warning his hosts just prior to our parable, during this awkward dinner where he's healed and messed with the seating arrangement and told the story about the great banquet. He's telling his host not to consult any records he has kept on all of the people. Not good or bad, not the columns in the accounting that's friend or foe, not rich or poor. None of the books, none of the ways in which we've got the columns that we write of everybody in the world. Homeschool mom, unemployed, homeless, rich. All of the bookkeeping where we've kind of put everything in its right place, in its right category. And Jesus is at the party in this honor-shame culture saying, I fired the whole department. The whole bookkeeping system is gone. It's as if the point of Jesus, when he's talking about reciprocity here, because in Luke 14, there is a thing where he's like, look, invite the people who can't repay you, who have nothing to offer you, that doesn't elevate your status. Those are the people that I'm centering. And this reciprocity and repayment, it's a point. It's as if Jesus is saying, listen, you are absolutely mired in your scorekeeping, bookkeeping lives. You're so busy trying to hold the world together by getting your accounts straight, you could hardly have time to notice that it's falling apart faster than ever. Why don't you just let go? Remember last week that word aphiemi in Greek, that's the to forgive, let the weeds grow together, release, let go. It's the same word he uses again in Luke here. Let it go. Thumb your nose at the ledger. Drop dead to the accounting. Jesus is saying, you want to have a life? Have a loser's life. Spit in the eye of the accounting department. Don't mess for a minute with anything that isn't last or lost or leased or broken or dead, because that's where the action is. That's where the center is. And Jesus is saying, that's where I am. It's not in your Guinness Book of World Spiritual Records. And he's pointing us to resurrection, not indirectly, but directly. That verse, right before the verse that Anna began with, when Jesus says, on verse 14, not 15 where we started, Jesus says, you will be happy, Makarios. He tells the host, and you will be blessed, happy. Although they cannot repay you, those that you brought into this party, you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. At the resurrection. He's asking us to look to resurrection. It's because these losers and deadbeats you invite, they won't be able to repay you. And he says, in other words, the happiness can never come until the bookkeeping stops. And that moment, this happy moment, the moment of this cataclysmic event where the blessedness comes, is at resurrection and the resurrection of the just, of the justified, of the faithful. And I love this. I'm going to read you a section, somewhat lengthy, from Robert Farrar Capone that I've been using his quotes each sermon because he's such a brilliant writer and poet. And this is a build-up where he's saying that the just are not these stuffy, righteous types with year-long lists of good works, but simply all the forgiven sinners of the world who live by faith, who trust Jesus to laugh out loud and to lay off all of the accountants. And now I'll read you his words. And the unjust. Well, the unjust are all the forgiven sinners of the world who stupidly live by unfaith, who are going to insist on showing up at the resurrection with all their record books as if it were an IRS audit. The unjust are the idiots who are going to try to talk Jesus into checking his bookkeeping against theirs. Do you know what Jesus is going to say to them? What, for example, he will say to his host if he comes to the resurrection with such a request? I think he'll say, just forget it, Arthur. I suppose we have those books around here somewhere, and if you're really determined to stand in front of my great white throne and make an ass of yourself, I guess they can be opened. Frankly, though, nobody up here pays any attention to them. What will happen will be that while you're busy reading and weeping over everything in those books, I will go and open my other book, the book of life. The book that has in it the names of anybody and everybody I ever drew to myself by dying and rising. And when I open that book, I'm going to read out loud to the whole universe every last word that was written there. And do you know what it's going to be? It's just going to be Arthur, nothing less. None of your bad deeds, because I erased all of them. And none of your good deeds, because I didn't count any of them either. I just enjoyed them. So what I'll read out loud, Arthur, will just be Arthur, real loud. And my Father will smile and say, hey, Arthur, you're just the way I pictured you. And the universe will giggle and say, that's some Arthur you got there. But me, I'll just wink at you and say, Arthur, come on up here and plunk yourself down by my great white throne. And let's you and me have a good long practice laugh before this party gets so loud we can't even hear how much fun we're having. I love it because it invites me into what the kingdom looks like. And the bookkeeping department has been fired. It's not a polished room of the powerful. Jesus says it like this. The kingdom is a dinner party full of outsiders and nobodies and surprise guests. The kingdom is wheat and weeds in a field growing together, messy and unresolved. Kingdom's a mustard seed, teeny and unimpressive. It's yeast in dough, slow and hidden. It's not a corporate boardroom or a red carpet gala or a DC fundraiser. It's a feast for the hungry, a home for the broken, an open table for the unqualified. In other words, the kingdom doesn't announce itself with fireworks and opulence. It grows quietly, patiently, often invisibly. If you're clinging to status, power, or certainty, you're going to miss it. So my question as we close, and band, you can come on up. Where do you see yourself in the story? Are we the guests who made excuses? The ones too busy to enter the party? Our own lives have so much importance that we miss the kingdom. Or are we the ones who've arrived, lounging? How great is it to be in the kingdom? Cheers, when we've mistaken the echo of the kingdom for the real thing. Or are we the ones at the margins, willing to come, not because we're important or deserve it? We didn't even get the invite. We're just hungry. It doesn't give me any easy answers. It's giving me better questions, but no easy answers. So the invitation is for you. My closing is, this is the scandal of grace. God is not impressed with your seating assignment. He is not asking for your credentials. Your clipboard won't get you in. He's asking if you'll come hungry, because in the kingdom of God, the seats of honor are already filled with the ones we least expect. So whatever room you're trying to prove yourself in, leave it. The party has already started and the bookkeeping department has been fired. That's grace. As Jesus telling us a story over Sunday dinner that's really strange at first, but might just save your life. Amen.